What's up, Managing Madrid podcast listeners? This is Kiyan Sobhani. Happy international break. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week despite Real Madrid's struggles of late against Barcelona. But here's a little treat for you heading into the weekend. Some free clips taken from today's patron-only podcast that ran 1 hour and a half. It's a two-parter. Sid and I in part one, mailbag. We answered a bunch of questions. Part two, Matt Wiltse and I also answered questions, and we spoke about his article, Rodrygo versus Kvara, on managingmadrid.com. So these are clips taken from that. Hope you enjoy it. And just some quick housekeeping. Tomorrow, which is Friday, on Discord at 1 p.m. Eastern, we are doing a live audio podcast. You can actually join, do a Q&A, unmute your microphone, and speak to me directly and ask questions. There will be no recording of that after the fact. It will be only for those who join live. So if you want access to that, go to our Discord channel, and we'll see you there. All right, enjoy the clips. Well, it's interesting because, to me, the ideal Real Madrid manager, one of the requirements he needs to have is that he needs to care about the youth players and long-term vision, which is really hard to find that kind of person because a lot of these managers who come in low, they're not going to be here in 5 years. So why should they care about developing X-player? You know what I mean? And that's always been hard to juggle. I think Zidane had that. It's like when he first came up from Castilla, he was using the young players quite a bit. I feel like over time, he just kind of started to double down on the starters. And a lot of the younger players who came through who were not coached by Zidane kind of lost out and they left. And I do wonder with Raul, for example, to me, and I'm always a little bit biased towards Castilla players and grooming them. Not all of them, and in not all cases. You don't have to force it if they're not good enough. I'm not saying that, but I think there's a lot of really good Castilla players who can contribute on a squad level. Maybe they can't contribute being as good as Raul was or Casillas was, because those players are generational. But I think they can just be really good players. And I think that's one of the benefits of Raul, for example. There's going to be a question about Raul and coaches coming up, but one of the benefits is, would he also, while trying to win now simultaneously, would care to also, look at some of these young players, bring them up and pepper them with minutes so that they can be ready in 2 years and 3 years, or maybe even season of when the team needs them if there's an emergency. And I think that's a must for a Real Madrid coach to have that, in his repertoire. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't know. I go back and forth on this because the reality is that there is a model where if you sign all the best players and you allow one department to take care of the players and you allow one department to focus purely on performance optimization, I can see the argument for segmenting it that way. Like, coaches are temporary, managers are temporary, they wear people out. The players are always going to be turned over. So maybe I'm not sure, man. My thing is, it all comes back to how well you execute anything. If you're signing all the best players in the world and you're picking a decent coach and you're winning everything, you're not going to worry about youth development. It's these years like now when we're short on squad depth that you worry about those things. But, I think this season we did make a mistake with how we built the squad. We could use the young guys, but there is enough money in the bank account to not have to use them. And that's where I don't know if the Real Madrid head coach has to prioritize youth development. I do think the Castilla coach should, for sure. But I don't think the head coach needs to as much personally. I think there are certain players who need to be prioritized. Alvaro is a very good piece. We have who else has come out from Castilla in recent years?
The fact that you can't think of it means that there's been really no one. I mean, we have the Odegaards, the Achrafs, the Reguilons, those guys for sure. But I think this brings up a different discussion too, which is interesting, Sid, because I think it's true what you said, that if you're winning, you don't really care if the players are coming from Castilla or if they're coming from Mars, really. If you're winning, it masks everything. Losing Kovacic was an easy pill to swallow because we won a three-peat and we kept winning when he left, even though he's a really good player that we missed. You had Modric and Kroos, and then you had Fede Valverde come up, and then losing him was not a big deal. Losing Achraf now hurts more, for example, because Carvajal is a shell of himself, and I think the way the league has unfolded this season, it kind of brings out the problems, whereas winning masks some of those problems. And I think that's where the urgency comes in now, because everything we're hearing said is like, yeah, you're talking about we have money in the bank, but how much has Florentino come out and said publicly we can't compete anymore, we have to develop young players and all this? But it just seems like, are you really developing them, or are you just kind of putting the briefcase away until the Mbappe becomes available?
Well, that's what they're doing. And I will say this. I think Ashraf for 60 million, I think that's a good deal today compared to what I thought when it happened. Like, I don't see him as fulfilling the potential I thought he would at that time. He's good. He's not quite generational. I think Pedro Porro is a better player, honestly. And
Wow.
yeah, straight up. I think he's straight up a better player. That's if Ashraf continues to play in football for that much longer, obviously, which we don't know. And then Serge Reguilon, I also think for 30 million I thought that's a decent deal. Like, I don't see him starting for a top club anytime soon. And it's those, like, I know he's at Atletico now, but he's a very physical fullback. I just think the level of technical quality we're looking for, I don't mind selling guys like that. It's really like someone like Alvaro, who should be getting a lot more time right now with Kareem hurt. I think more than anything, we're in a strange situation because we've pivoted transfer strategy, and for the first time in like maybe 15 years, we don't just throw money at things, and that's good in some ways. But yeah, I mean, the club is like in a weird place where I think they want to keep up what was happening during the three-peat years, have a stacked squad, but they also want to make sure they only sign the best players. And so we have this window where if this is how they're going to go about things, yes, I agree. We need to completely prioritize youth development. Like, they can't be like neglecting the youth team if they're only going to sign a perfect fit every time. Then you have to develop internally. It's certainly a good question. And it really comes back to, I feel like Real Madrid only see a handful of exits to the type of team they're trying to build. That's really what it comes back to. They're really trying to segment the field in a way where they want the best players only. They don't want to consider alternative ways to team building. And I can understand that, because someone like Mbappe, if we sign him, he probably breaks everything, and who knows, maybe we win another three-peat. And that kind of ties into some of our upcoming questions about how victories can manifest situations like this where there's like unclear strategy because your process wasn't that good, but your results were better. So you stick with the process.
Yeah, I mean, these are all important points. And in some ways, these discussions that we're having with Real Madrid, it's a unique discussion because, like, if we're talking about a smaller team, then the development of these younger players is even more important, right? When we're talking about a team like Real Madrid that could potentially transcend any tactical flaw and any mistakes in youth development by signing the best players in the world, and all of a sudden you're winning, is a different discussion. And I want to go back to a couple of things you said, which are interesting. Some of these decisions that Real Madrid made was selling these young players, because I know the club gets a lot of shit for it. I think you rightfully pointed out that Reguilon is, it's not a player you're going to lose sleep over losing, for example. I think Reguilon at Tottenham under Pochettino and Mourinho, or maybe it was, I don't remember the Pochettino.
It was just Mourinho.
It was Mourinho, right? Yeah. Mourinho and Reguilon, that actually was, you got a pretty good version of Reguilon there. Conte obviously didn't use him, and now he's just been injured like since then, essentially since going to Atleti. And I don't know what's going to happen for him from now on. But he's just like, the Reguilon example is more of like just like a good squad player you could potentially have in the squad. What I think, and then the other one that hurts for obvious reasons is Odegaard, because he would fill a need. He would fit right in the dynamic young midfielders who can play vertically and play with modern football. The Odegaard thing was always a little bit complicated because it was hard for him to be convinced to stay when you had Modric and Kroos, who are better than him. You'd have to basically just keep playing him sporadically and convince him to, like, hey, the future is yours. And obviously that's just a difficult thing to do. So he's gone. End of discussion. The Atraf one is interesting because 60 million you said is good business, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen with his future. Like you said, we'll wait and see on that. He is one of those players that has come out and said, like, I was never given a choice to stay or leave. Like, don't say I wouldn't have fought for my place. I would have really been interested to see, had Real Madrid kept him, if he would have just been a starter like a year or two ago already. Because he would have played a lot because Carvajal's health was really bad. And I almost wonder if he's one you almost... What would have happened if you didn't loan him out at all? Going back to the example of it's good to have these guys in the squad to train with the team. I wonder what the future would have been if he didn't go to Dortmund at all and had just stayed at Real Madrid as a player who fills in here and there and then eventually just becomes a starter because Carvajal deteriorates physically. That's an interesting what if to have. And I think because you pointed out maybe he's not as good as other people perceive him as. There's two things I would say to that. That one is that he'd obviously be an immediate upgrade to what we have now. The second thing is I think what makes him a commodity in terms of value is that the right back market is not abundant. It's a scarce resource at this point. The Weekend. This will be the last question we'll take. The Weekend says, hey, you guys, so this week's discourse in the tabloids is who should be Carlo's successor since it seems inevitable for a summer divorce. The common names are Zidane, Tuchel, Pochettino, and Conte, but the fact that Raul isn't being mentioned as much as before or Xabi Alonso even being mentioned at all is concerning, in my opinion. Zidane left because he was forced out due to the board selling fake news to the press. Pochettino got exposed in PSG. Tuchel and Conte seem to always have problems with ownership and board members. Xabi, meanwhile, is having a good spell at Bayer Leverkusen, and Raul, despite the recent slump, has been looking as good as any newcomer on the bench. But if they insist on wanting to go for a coach with a name and pedigree, why not bring in Mourinho? At least he had a lasting impact on the culture for the team, and he has a great eye for talent with the signings of Ozil and Modric as examples.
That's a loaded question. Let's chop it up. Why don't we just start with Mr. Jose Mourinho, like the last point there.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, he has a good eye for talent, especially if you give him unlimited money. But and he's doing better at Roma. I think that's something. Would you say? Have you been paying attention, Kiyan?
Little bit, not as much as I was 2 years ago when Mayoral was there, but seems.
So his assistant at Tottenham, he picked him up. Let me pull up his name. I mean, I don't want to pull up his name because I'm not going to say the nicest thing, but his assistant at Tottenham didn't do the best job. He was a young guy, and him and like whatever they tried at Tottenham, it didn't mesh. Like I shouldn't even say his assistant didn't do the best job, but they didn't mesh. He tried some new things. At Roma, I believe they have a pretty analytics inclined front office and ownership, and on top of that, they also picked up some good pieces, and they started using video walls and training. I think he has modernized a little. I guess I don't want to like go and immediately bash Mourinho. I'm not, but as you know, it's Real Madrid. We signed Mourinho coming off a treble. Let him go somewhere else and win before he comes here. Honestly, we signed him off a treble, not after like successive failed spells. So if he wins the Europa this year, let him step up. There's still a gap between Roma and Real Madrid, is my honest opinion. He needs to work his way back up the ladder.
Yeah, I'm out on the Mourinho train. I think he was for his time. He was necessary for his time. I think the ship has sailed. I think it would be a very unimaginative, uncreative option, which is typically the way that Real Madrid actually go, is they go for the safe route, the familiar faces, the ones who are just easy to bring in. So he's not at the top of my list. It's funny though, like I actually, out of all the names brought up here and in the media and from fans, so the list here I think is, and if I missed anyone, let me know: Zidane, Tuchel, Pochettino, Conte, Raul, Xabi Alonso, Mourinho.
Conte is not a candidate, right? Like he mentioned him, but I don't think he mentioned him as a candidate.
Nah, I don't honestly don't. There was a time where, like, I think it was when Lopetegui got sacked that they tried to bring him in, but I don't know if there's any real tangible evidence of that happening now. But let's just pretend this is the hypothetical list. And I don't think Zidane's coming back right now. So I'll just leave that there. I kind of lean towards the two most inexperienced managers here for whatever reason. And that's just a feeling, is that I love Tuchel as a genius tactician, but skeptical of his management of the locker room at Real Madrid, based on what we saw in PSG. Pochettino, maybe 3-4 years ago, would be interesting. Not now. Conte, no, not interested at all. Raul, for all of his inexperience, has been way more successful in Castilla than Zidane was when we promoted him. And he has the man management style down. He has a tactical brain. But Xabi is the one I would really lean towards, because he at least has some top flight experience. I think he's doing good at Leverkusen now. Maybe he could bring Frimpong with him. Maybe he could bring Diaby with him. Who knows? But that would be a bonus. But Xabi is really, really interesting. I said it at the time when we signed him as a player, that when we signed him as a player, he was outside of Xavi and Iniesta, who already played for Barcelona. We were competing with the greatest midfield of all time up until that point in history. Xabi was the one player left that we could bring in as like a cerebral, intelligent, talented player who could organize us. I feel that way. I feel like he has that as a coach too, even though we've barely seen him. I kind of would just trust him. I think for obvious reasons, he would command the respect of everyone. He's a very well-respected figure. I trust his ability to keep us focused on football and not drama. I trust his tactical brain. I'd be really interested to see what direction he takes the team in. I lean towards my two favorite from this list, apart from Zidane, who I don't think is coming back right now, would be Xabi and then Raul, I think. More so than Tuchel, Conte, Pochettino, Mourinho.
Yeah, I'm almost in universal agreement. I think out of Tuchel, Pochettino, Conte, Mourinho, for me, I think Conte, Mourinho, we can effectively just rule out. I think they're just worse options. If you had to go for any of those four, like before we get to the Real Madrid guys who we're probably going to hire, if you had to go for any of them, it would be Pochettino or Tuchel. I'll be honest, I think Pochettino has gotten a very bad rep from what happened at PSG, and I don't agree with it. I think that club is a mess. I think Tuchel is such a genius, but I wonder how it would have went for Tuchel if he had Messi on the team. Honestly, that's like another tactical complication, and it just complicates things for coaches who want to control how things play out on the field more and for the team's benefit. But still, if they want to have their say, it's harder when you have multiple defensive liabilities. Neymar wanted to defend way more, as we've established. So I think Tuchel and Pochettino are underrated options. I think Pochettino would have a great time at a club that was willing to support him pressing. I think my thing with both of them is, like, Tuchel, more than anything, we saw at PSG that he can create a really cool structure on a couple stars. And when it clicked, it clicked. It was really injuries that saw them not go that far. And I am, once again, fascinated by him more than anything. Just the possibility of 18 months with him. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't see how he wouldn't have a period where he's doing well if he gets buy-in. Because I've come to understand, like, I mean, I've been thinking about Tuchel a lot ever since he got sacked at Chelsea. And yeah, all the reports are that he can't handle a locker room, but he reached a Champions League final with PSG. And I guess
he did. That was their best year. He got the best out of Neymar too.
Yes, and the run was easy. I will caveat it every time. They had an easy path to the final. It was a joke. Like, it was nothing like what we did last year. But look at their performance in the final. They played really well against a really, really, like, against maybe one of the best teams ever, honestly. Like, and they played a great game. They actually outperformed them on expected goals. All their metrics popped off. Ryan O'Hanlon wrote a great piece about it back in the day. They had two of the best expected goals metrics of any team ever, and Bayern and PSG. And yeah, it was cool to see that PSG did hit an apex like that. So I'm going to say that because Tuchel did that at PSG, I'll give him a chance. I think Poch is more of an out-of-possession coach. I think Tuchel is more of an in- and out-of-possession coach. So that's why I would favor Tuchel. Poch is really reliant on winning the second ball, and I love him, but that might not fly here. And that However, I agree with you that Raul and Xabi Alonso are great picks because, it's interesting. Zidane did such a great job, but he's actually the least tactical of the three minds out of him, Raul, and Xabi as far as how they approached the game, how they played the game. Raul was the center forward who dropped off, before Benzema. And then obviously you have Xabi, who is a six. He's, in fact, the closest thing to Pep Guardiola from our club as far as having played for the club and having went into coaching and having a background and clearly thinks about the game a lot. And a lot of people say he's played under so many coaches. I would love to see a team that starts cooking for 60 minutes and then just shuts up shop and grinds out results sometimes. It would be fun to see the versatility. Xabi's aura is just phenomenal. It is one of the greatest auras in the game. I think his aura transcends his stature as a player, just his demeanor. I think it's like Guardiola. Guardiola was a good player, but he wasn't anywhere near what he is as a coach. And the buy-in he gets as a coach, it's not just because of how he played as a player. Whereas maybe someone like Zidane, he commanded instant respect. I think someone like Guardiola and Xabi, they still need to prove that they need to command respect, but they know the game so well because they played the six. And I would go with Xabi as well. I'm sold, man. This guy sold me. It was even before the win in Munich, he had me kind of sold the way he was performing with Leverkusen. And yeah, man, I'm sold. Xabi would be the dream for sure. If I had to go for someone else, if the club thinks Raul is a good fit, if they see similarities with how Zidane came up, if they see his tactical mind, sure. But from what I know, I don't pay enough attention to Castilla, so I'm biased. But Tuchel or Xabi would be great picks for me. You could do Tuchel, then Xabi. I like the short list, though, in that I'm pretty sure we won't go for Conte or Mourinho. So I like the short list we're working with, honestly. What do you think? We go for easy options, but we've had worse short lists before.
Well, the other variable is maybe Ancelotti will stay after we win the Champions League. But I agree with a lot of the Tuchel stuff you said. Put it this way, part of the reason I'm more optimistic against Chelsea this year than I was last year, apart from the fact that Chelsea was better last year, is that Tuchel's gone. And I hated playing against him because I feel like he figured us out every time. And yeah, out of all the more experienced guys, he would be at the top of my list for sure.
We barely beat them, and that was the only Champions League they lost under Tuchel, and I can't even believe they performed that well. And it was when all the Ukraine-Russia thing was going down. It was crazy. And yeah, there's just no way they are as scary this year.
He's also just the type of coach who can make adjustments really quickly if he sees something wrong. He adjusted to everything that went wrong in the first leg at Stamford Bridge. He adjusted quickly. Had that Mendy mistake too that Benzema scored on in the second half. So, but despite that, he looked at all that and he subbed Christensen at halftime. He was like, all right, this is not working. He made an immediate change. And second leg was much better. But obviously the inevitable Real Madrid Champions League DNA took over. He was powerless against that. Let's talk about your article. So I'm going to take a shot at it, Matt. This is a reveal on the podcast. I'm going to pronounce his name. First time ever. Rodrygo versus Kvaratskhelia.
Oof, that's pretty good.
I don't know if it's actually good. The article is called Rodrygo versus Kvaratskhelia, the ultimate showdown of two rising stars. Who comes out on top? I skimmed the comments on your Twitter when you posted the article, and it was amusing because everyone read the headline and had some stuff to say to you. Then you replied and said, then you replied and said, read the article. And then they read the article. They replied back and apologized and said, great work. I love that. One of my pet peeves is when people comment on headlines and not articles without reading. And it's like, everything you just told me, buddy, is answered in the article. So just stop, read it, and then comment. So I guess let's start from the top. Why did you decide that this is a talking point that needs to be addressed?
A couple of things. One, I kind of briefly mentioned it on the post-game show over the weekend after Barcelona. And I made the point, you stick Rodrygo into that Napoli team, give him the left wing, give him the freedom and the trust. I think he produces similar numbers to Kvara. And I think If you look at their underlying numbers, that's true. And I wanted to dig deeper into that to like really build that narrative. And I wanted to prove the point that like, yeah, everyone's clamoring. Like, there's been a lot of clamoring for this revelation of Europe. This guy that's probably going to cost over 100 million now because of his breakout season. He's been linked with Real Madrid for the simple reason that he loves Real Madrid and he loves Guti, which he's got great taste.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's how you know he's a true Madridista. He's not like, oh, my favorite player was Zidane, my favorite player was so and so. No, his favorite player was Guti. But I just wanted to make the point that like, yes, this is a great player, and of course, I would love to have him on our squad if like he wasn't 100 million and would take away from pursuing other options. Like, yeah, I'm all for it. If you could pick him up easy, then yeah, definitely. But you have a player right now who's only starting 60% of the games, who can make an immediate impact to your offense, and literally has almost a like-for-like statistical profile to Kvara, and he's playing in position, and he's not even playing in his most comfortable position. So I think, which is what Kvara would have to do if he came here. He's not going to play on the left. So he would literally have to take the Rodrygo role, and they had the same number. So why would you spend 100 million? So I think for me, it was more kind of changing the narrative and getting people to understand that we have a hell of a player in Rodrygo, and it's time to give him more responsibility and give him the keys so that he can go on and get more responsibility at Real Madrid and make the big difference.
Yeah, so very interesting points. And with Kvara, I think the struggle for me has always been, like, when you say the Rodrygo role, that's essentially not even a starting role right now, by the way. That's just further trying to figure out who does what and who plays where, and all these guys have their best position in the same position. So someone's going to have to play out of position, or you just basically everything goes to the left for the next 10 years. I've always struggled with Kvara because he seems like a really cool dude. Seems like a player we would love to have on our team. Madridista, as you said, it doesn't get any more hipster than having Guti as your idol. But I never understood the fit from a tactical perspective, because this guy, he's not a pure striker, although he can play that role in some situations, just like Rodrygo can. He wants to play on the left. I've heard people say he can play on the right, which is fine, but I need to see more data on that, because if he's going to come here and play on the right, we're just testing out a new thing and experimenting it after signing him for a lot of money. And they're just hoping that he could actually play on the right wing. Because this season, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, he hasn't played on the right once. He's played on the left 26 times, actually 30 times on the left, and 4 times in the middle, if who scored is accurate. So that's just Rodrygo, but more expensive. And I do think you bring up a lot of valid points, because you and I are on the same page with Rodrygo. We believe he starts. Sid and I in part 1 had Rodrygo both in our best 11 that we think that needs to be put out in the Champions League and against Barcelona. And I've always believed that you have to look at their playing time and their efficiency in the playing time, and then try to extrapolate that and apply it. Like, if you had this over long term, if you're giving this guy consistent minutes, how much can you actually increase his output? And I think it's a fair conversation to have. This is why I was against players like Rafinha in the summertime. I didn't just imagine if Rafinha was here, a good player, gave us a bunch of problems in Clásico. Don't want to disrespect him. What would happen to Rodrygo this season if we had Rafinha, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you would imagine that it kind of gets back to the Fede Valverde conundrum as well. Like, is Fede if you sign Rafinha, then does he move back into the midfield? And then how does that impact minutes? And how would that impact the role of Camavinga, Tchouaméni? And so there's Ceballos. So there's a huge domino effect to bringing players in, regardless of what position they play. And so yeah, to your point, Rodrygo's really hasn't had the consistency he needs to get going, in my opinion. He's only started 60% of the matches. He's just having a poor finishing season. He's underperforming his XG um, by 4 goals in the league. So, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, Kvara's overperforming by 5 goals. So, if they were actually performing at the levels expected, Rodrygo would have one more goal than Kvara this season, and they'd both be around 7, 8 goals. Like that's what would be expected. Think about the Barcelona miss. Think about the miss against Atletico Madrid. Like these are shots you normally expect Rodrygo to make. He's getting into the right spots. He's just right now in a little bit of a slump. And I think, as I wrote about in the article, like I think as soon as he gets one, the floodgates will open. That good old ketchup bottle analogy. I think it'll come good for him, and he'll start scoring. And I think the only way to really do that, though, is give the guy a consistent run in the team. You saw how well he proved against Liverpool at Anfield that he can do the Fede role, like play both ways. I thought his defensive work rate in that game was immaculate, and he still provided a threat going forward as well. Like it wasn't so much of a detriment on his offensive game that he had to do that defensive work, and he proved he can do it. So we're at the point now where we need an added layer to our offense. He's a guy that can bring that. It's just I think you're at the point where he has to play. He has to start. He'd be in my best 11 as well.